Welcome once again. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing one of my favorite thriller writers of all time, Brad Thor. We're going to be taking a look at his Scott Harvath thriller series, namely Near Dark, the 20th book in the series. And let me tell you something, it is spectacular. But before I get to the book, I want to tell you a little story, a little personal story about myself and Mr. Brad Thor. Now, I've been collecting these Scott Harvath thriller novels, starting with The Lions of Lucerne, which came out almost 20 years ago. I bought it when it came out, like the week it came out, I bought it because I knew that Brad Thor was a fellow Utahn. I live in Draper, Utah. Brad Thor used to live in Park City, Utah. I heard that his novel was coming out. I wanted to support my fellow Utah writer, so I bought a copy. I read it. I started collecting the Scott Harvath thrillers ever since. Every year they come out, I'm first in line to buy a copy. Let me tell you something. When he was just a new author, I went to one of his book signings at the Sugar House Barnes & Noble in Utah. And he was just a beginning writer back then. This was a long time ago, 17 years ago. I'm telling you guys, I was the only dude that showed up to the signing. But the cool thing was, Brad Thor signed my books and spent the next hour talking to me and just me about the craft of writing, the craft of storytelling, and the business of publishing, because I had told him that I was an aspiring writer. And he took his time to help me out. At that time, this was like I said, 17 years ago. I hadn't published anything. In fact, I had only written half of my first novel. It was an epic horror novel that I was trying to be like Stephen King. And I'd really only written about half of that at the time. I mean, my fantasy series was only a twinkle in my eye. But the dude sat there and talked to me for an hour about the publishing business. Not only that, but he said, when you think you're good enough and when you feel like you're good enough, the name of my literary agent, he told me, you need to get a literary agent before you can get a publishing deal. He said, my literary agency is Sanford J. Greenberger. When you feel confident in your writing, send them a submission, find out what agent in their pool represents whatever it is you've written, and send them a submission, see if you can get representation. That's exactly what I did. I followed his advice. My horror novel, it wasn't that great. It was an amateur novel. But then I started writing my epic fantasy. And there just so happened to be one of the best epic fantasy agents in the world worked for Sanford J. Greenberger, Mr. Matt Bialer. Shout out to Matt. Because I did query Matt, and he did sign me, and he did get me a book deal with Simon & Schuster. So, a shout out to Brad Thor for helping me out as a young dude, as a young writer. I know this was a long time ago. He probably has no recollection of this event. But that's okay. I remember it, and I will always remember it, and I will always pump up Brad Thor novels because of that, because he's just a cool dude. In fact, when he signed my novels, I mean, take a look at this. To Brian, never give up. He knew I wanted to be a writer. And he knew the main thing about being a writer is just never giving up, and you will get published. To Brian, see you on the New York Times bestseller list. Hey, I might not, Brad Thor's made the bestseller list in the New York Times. I never have. But let me tell you something. The Forgetting Moon, last July 2019, was the number 2 selling Amazon/Audible.com book in the world. Number 2 in the world. So I have been on a bestseller list. Number 1 epic fantasy in the world. I've been on a list. It might not be the New York Times bestseller list, but it's the Amazon.com bestseller list. So, shout out to Brad Thor just for that. And that's not even getting into the book yet. We haven't even talked about the book yet. Let's talk about the book, shall we? Near Dark, book number 20 in the Scott Harvath series. There's a lot of books in the series so far. What I love about this book, more so than probably the other books, with the exception of the debut. In fact, I'm just going to start out by saying this is his best book after his debut, The Lions of Lucerne. Bar none. I loved Near Dark. I mean, we start out with Near Dark. Let's just get it. Thrillers, we read thrillers. One of the reasons we read thrillers, us thriller lovers, is because it takes us, it's like James Bond taking us to exotic locations. And that's what Brad Thor does. That's what Daniel Silva does. That's what Jack Carr does. That's what Robert Ludlum does. That's what Tom Clancy does. All of my favorite thriller writers take us to exotic locations, and we do spy, thriller, assassin stuff in these exotic locations with exotic women and a lot of action. That's what we love. And Brad Thor, from the get-go, we're going to some exotic locations here. I love thrillers that take me out into the world. And one of the things is, I love it when they take me to places that I've already visited, because then I can really picture it in my mind. And I was thrilled when Scott Harvath, our main protagonist, rolls in to Lake Garda, Italy, because I've been to Lake Garda, and I'm telling you, it is one of the most beautiful places I have ever been on this planet. And so when he rolls into Lake Garda and he goes into Sirmone and in the castles there, I knew exactly what we were looking at. I have been there. For those of you that don't know where Lake Garda is, it is just north of Verona in the Italian Alps. And I'm telling you, it is the most exquisitely beautiful lake on the planet. Even more beautiful than Lake Como, in my opinion, and I've been to both places. We also get to go to Normandy. We get to go to the south of France, the north of France. We get to go to Norway. Let's talk about Normandy. I mean, we were at Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, St. Malo. And we also get to go to Mont Saint-Michel. The story takes us to Mont Saint-Michel. I even wore my Mont Saint-Michel t-shirt in honor of that. You know, when I was in Mont Saint-Michel, it's also one of my favorite places in Europe to ever visit, Mont Saint-Michel. This fortress out in this, it's off the coast of France, out in the sea, and it's a big fortress, reminds you of something right out of Lord of the Rings. Just a big rock jutting out of the ocean with a big, massive fortress and abbey on top of it. When I was visiting it, I was thinking to myself, man, would it be cool to write a novel about this place, about the history of this place, about people chasing each other around through the dungeons and crypts and abbeys and catacombs and passageways and battlements and all the cool places that you can explore in Mont Saint-Michel. What an awesome novel that would make. And Brad Thor takes us there in Near Dark. Towards the end of the book, the climax of the book is the spies and the assassins chasing each other through this massive fortress. And it is magnificent. I loved every word of it. I was like, now this is how you do it right. This is how you do a thriller right. Take me on an adventure to cool places and have cool shit happen. And Brad Thor nails it. Mont Saint-Michel. And speaking of which, take a look at this cover. That's Mont Saint-Michel, the fortress, right there on the cover. And I got to tell you something. These covers are dope. I mean, these covers are fly. They're off the hook. They are mad, seriously on fire. Every one of the whoever the graphic designer is at Simon & Schuster that's putting these things together, you know, is doing a amazing job with the graphic design. I mean, these books pop off the shelf and they are superb in presentation. I mean, this is sharp. This thing is like glowing silver. It's beautiful. Beautiful. I love a great book presentation and package. And we're getting them with these. Same with the Jack Carr, James Reese novels. Those things are looking swank. Shout out to the graphic designers, you know. they're on fire. And so is Brad Thor. Brad Thor's on fire with his writing. His writing is crisp. His storytelling is on point. Everything about this novel is why we love to read thriller novels, is because this guy can write. He doesn't miss a beat. His writing is perfect. I mean, he's done 20 of these novels now, and he is at the top of his game in Near Dark. Now, let's talk about some of the, I don't do spoilers on my reviews, but let's get into a little bit of the plot of this. I've gushed on and on about vague general things, but let's get into some of the plot. Scott Harvath is our main hero. He's a Navy SEAL. He's been through tons of adventures in the previous 19 books, most of which are, dealing with global events and terrorism, and he's got to save the world. One of the reasons I liked Near Dark is because he's not necessarily saving the world this time. He's just simply trying to solve the murder of one of his good friends. A little bit of a spoiler alert for all these novels is, and I've got them all here. I've got the whole Brad Thor collection. I love them. One of the things is, he starts off the book, Scott Harvath, he's gone through a shit ton of bad stuff, and he's pissed off a shit ton of bad people in these other previous 19 novels, and now he's kind of in hiding. And bounty hunters are looking for him all over the world, assassins and bounty hunters. I mean, he is a marked man, and he's kind of hiding out in Florida. And it's kind of like he's hanging out in bars getting drunk. I mean, this is a much more dark and moody Scott Harvath than we've seen before, because a lot of bad things have happened to him in these books, and a lot of people that he loves have been killed in these previous books. And he's dealing with the aftermath and post-traumatic stress in this book from the get-go, and he's hanging out in bars getting drunk and just beating up just anybody that mouths off to the bartender or acts like a big bully or a jerk. Scott Harvath is right there to kick their ass. Kind of like Jack Reacher, in the Lee Child books, Jack Reacher rolls into town and just starts kicking everyone's ass. That's where Scott Harvath kind of is at the beginning of this book. Some people come in and into his life and tell him that one of his best friends has been killed. And so now Scott Harvath goes off to find who the killer is. And we get to meet a new cast of characters that I loved. I loved meeting these people. I loved how they were introduced. I love how Brad Thor sets them up for the future events in the story. And, they were great characters. I mean, probably my favorite is Solvi, the ex-drug-using Norwegian sort of supermodel who is sort of rehabbing herself from the drug use by becoming an international spy, a secret agent. Great setup and a badass character. Loved it. One of our other characters is Nekrasov or whatever, the Russian guy who's kind of cruising around Paris. Like he's getting street thugs off of the Paris streets and recruiting them into his little army. And then we've got Paul, or in other words, his real name is Michael, and he's IRA. He's one of the IRA assassins, and he's hiding out in Normandy, and he's an assassin. He's a bad guy, and you don't want to cross him. You don't want to meet him in a dark alley because he's a bad killer. And those are some of the, just a few of the characters that are new characters that are introduced in the novel that we get to follow. And I won't tell you which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are on Scott Harvath's side, which ones betray him, which ones are hunting him. I won't tell you any of that because the joy is figuring it out on your own as you read the book. And so I will let you do that. But just let me tell you, they were all great characters. I got to tell you, Near Dark, one of my favorite, if not my second favorite, Scott Harvath novel. He's not saving the world this time. It's more of a simple find out who killed my friend novel and seek revenge. Great, super, loved it. Loved every minute of it. And what a great cover. I rank books 1 through 10. As you know, I have all of the previous 19 books, they're so solid. They're all 7 out of 10s, if not more. I'm going to give Near Dark a 9.5 out of 10 because I thought it was absolutely great. Everybody go out and start with book number 1, The Lions of Lucerne. Read through all 19. I mean, there are standalone novels. You don't have to read them all in order if you don't want to. But why wouldn't you want to? I mean, it's awesome to read them all in order, and I'm here to bring you awesome. So start with the beginning, read all your way through. You won't be disappointed. If you love Robert Ludlum, if you love Tom Clancy, if you love James Bond, if you love Robert Ludlum and Jason Bourne, if you love Daniel Silva, if you love Jack Carr, if you love Lee Child, if you love any of those guys, and you haven't tried Brad Thor yet, you are missing out. Get Brad Thor. He's a cool guy. He's helped me out. My books are published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. His books are published by Simon & Schuster's Atria Books, the Emily Bestler imprint. I give a shout out. I want to support and promote my fellow Simon & Schuster authors and my fellow Utah authors, because Brad Thor used to live in Park City. I live in Draper. We're Utah guys. Near Dark, get it. I give it a 9.5 out of 10.